zombies and mummies. It's an all-out assault. If you want to survive the night, better come down to the vault. Hello and welcome to the VHS Vault podcast. I am Owen Brand.
And I'm Katie Cadaver.
And we are here to today talk about some cool stuff. We've got something that's sort of important to both of us, and that is, we both have a very passionate love for...
passionate love
for horror movies. And, we kind of want to walk you through some of that, and maybe I want to talk a little bit about how I came to love horror, and I think you kind of want to do a little bit of the same.
I'd like that.
Yeah?
Yeah.
So let me ask you a question.
Shoot.
What is the earliest memory that you have from your childhood being scared while watching a movie?
I feel like there were aspects of movies that weren't even horror movies that I found scary. Like maybe even, the Conan movies with like Arnold Schwarzenegger. I seem to remember those.
Okay.
On VHS when we got our first VCR. I do believe that my dad drove us all the way to American in Madison, an hour away from Milwaukee, to get a VCR. Because that was like the only store that had them. So it was the 80s and we got our VCR. And I just remember like Conan the Destroyer or something. It was like what we rented. But I remember aspects of films before, even horror movies that were scary to me. But the figure that always stands out to me as being the first thing to scare me was Freddy Krueger.
Freddy Krueger. Mm-hmm. I think a lot of people have that one.
Yeah, Freddy scared the shit out of me as like, a single-digit kid. Very scary. But I wasn't allowed to watch the movies, but you couldn't be alive in the 80s without Freddy Krueger somehow crossing your path in some way. Like, it was just such a part of the popular culture at that time.
Yeah. No, it was for me too. And I think that, I don't know if that was my first, but it was definitely very, very early on that it scared the holy hell out of me. So fondest memories for you. Let's talk about your most favorite memory of being scared watching a movie when you were a kid. So
I'm thinking about kind of the way things worked at our house, which was that we weren't actually allowed to watch rated R movies. But if it was on TV, clearly it had been edited for all of the problematic things, and we were allowed to watch that.
Right.
So most of my first introductions to movies in general was stuff that we recorded off of TV, or that my parents recorded off of TV.
Interesting.
And, fast forward through the commercials and all that shit. Like, so I can remember, and probably the fondest memory I have of being able to watch horror on TV was when my grandparents would babysit. My grandpa always got a kick out of scaring the shit out of his grandkids. So there was Friday the 13th, the series was a show that was on at that time. It was like on Friday nights, and I'm sure that's when they were babysitting. And I remember my grandpa turning that on and scaring the shit out of me with that. I mean, just the intro to the show scared me at that point in my youth.
Absolutely.
But also The Haunted Honeymoon. Are you familiar with that movie?
I don't think so.
That's like a Gene Wilder movie, and he turns into like the Wolfman or something, and I don't know, he's like in a casket or something. I honestly haven't seen it since I was a kid, but I remember my grandpa was watching that on TV, and it scared the living shit out of me.
Wow.
And it wasn't even, now it would not be scary at all, but those were like, I was a sensitive kid,
No, for sure.
I had nightmares once because I saw like a book cover of, it wasn't, and now my mom read Stephen King books, so those used to kind of like creep me out a little bit. But I remember having nightmares from a cover of a book that my brother's friend brought over that was like scary looking. So I was very sensitive, but I slowly got introduced because my mom was into Stephen King, and she actually was into some horror that she would watch the made for TV movies like it. The Langoliers was one that I remember watching as a kid. Yeah. The Stand, stuff like that. She would get into that, and it was like, that's what was on TV. We only had the one, we were watching that or nothing. So I watched what my mom did. And my mom actually introduced me to Alfred Hitchcock and The Birds. She said that was her first horror experience, was seeing The Birds. So that she showed me that at, as a teenager or something.
Yeah.
And I remember having, that's a fond memory for me. Like anytime I watch that movie now, I think of that. But a fun little...
Such a great movie.
Yes. And a fun piece of trivia about my mom. It's like, she says she's not into horror, doesn't really like it, but loves Stephen King, which is horror all the way.
Sure.
And but there was two things that she did not, or three things rather, that she did not permit to have in our house. One was a Ouija board. The other two were copies of The Exorcist or The Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Those movies scare the shit out of her so bad.
Yeah.
She was like, don't even bring them in my house. And there's a whole story. If we ever talk about The Texas Chainsaw Massacre, I'll tell the story about my mom seeing that movie and why it was banned from our home forevermore. But, that was my intro.
Yeah.
It was a lot of made for TV Stephen King adaptations and, and horror TV still has a special place for me. I've watched a lot of it over the years.
Tales from the Crypt for me was really big growing up.
Oh, totally. We were into that. That is the one that I remember finding myself.
Yeah.
And I do remember even my mom was into it too and would let us, that's why we were allowed to watch it, because it was on TV. Movies were a different story. She wasn't willing to, because movies scared the shit out of my mom.
Yeah.
And she wasn't willing to let her kids kind of go down that road and, all the things that kids shouldn't be seeing at too young of age, which we all get there.
Yeah.
And I got there via my mom's sister, my aunt, who is a lot more lax with her kids. And so when she wasn't paying attention, and they had cable, so there was lot of, HBO and whatever.
Whole new world when you get cable as a kid.
Yep. And I had an older cousin. I still have him. He's 2 years older than me. So he was like the big brother figure for me. And he was the one that introduced me to probably most of the shit I shouldn't have been doing.
Yeah.
And he liked the horror movies. And, there was quite a few movies that I saw bits and pieces of through my older cousin. So, yeah, it was, the older I got, the more comfortable I got with things, so it just kind of was a slow progression. So what about you? Like, what's your origin story on horror? Come on.
So I talked about it in a different episode, I believe, but I do have a love for Gremlins. As a kid, that was a movie that I was allowed to watch because it was cute.
Us too.
It's
fond memories of that.
But you're seeing these evil demons being grinded up in a blender, and it's okay because it's Christmas time, right?
And everybody's having fun.
Yeah, so there was nothing wrong with that. So little history about me. My dad was a Baptist preacher, and he was not your typical stand at the pulpit and tell you you're going to hell if you don't give money to Jesus. That's not who Dad was. He listens to Led Zeppelin and enjoys a horror movie from time to time, but we didn't have a lot of it in the house just because of what was appropriate for a house of a pastor, right?
Owen Brand was a preacher's son.
So absolutely I was. And still am. My dad is down in Tennessee right now. They live out on a beautiful backwoods lot in the middle of nowhere. It's definitely a great location for a horror movie, for sure.
Ooh, well, if we ever have to film one, we know where to go.
Yeah, we'll know exactly where to go. So my getting my hands on horror movies at a young age was sometimes a challenge.
I bet.
I had an opportunity when I lived briefly. Our family, when we moved from Colorado, we moved in with my grandparents in Texas, in a little town called Watauga, Texas. It's outside of Fort Worth. Anyway, my Uncle Billy was into Tales from the Crypt. And when we went there, that was the first place that I had ever been that had cable, because I'd never had cable as a kid. So I got there, and Uncle Billy showed me Tales from the Crypt.
Good old Uncle Billy.
Yeah, Uncle Billy. If you're listening out there, thank you for that.
Thanks, Uncle Billy. You're the best.
You sent me down an amazing path there. But then from that point on, it was like I did whatever I could to get my hands on it. I tricked my big sister into renting Friday the 13th one time.
Yes, we heard that story.
Yeah, so she did that, and I really wasn't supposed to be watching it, but I did, and it was pretty epic. And then anytime I go to a friend's house, I'd look for some freaky stuff and try to watch it, even if his parents were like, yo, don't watch those. I'd be like, hey, man, let's stay the night. And we pop it in. just find any way to scare myself. But yeah, the TV movies, the TV shows, like you were talking about, were important for me too. And I remember probably with Gremlins, Tales from the Crypt, and Friday the 13th was my three big ones that got me introduced into the genre.
Yeah, I feel like I kind of came in on a lot of the same stuff. It was what was permitted in the home for, our age group or whatever. So yeah, I relate to that a lot. And I didn't get, into more, I don't know, interesting horror movies and revisit a lot of this stuff until I was much, much older.
Yeah.
But even as a teenager, like Scream was cool for me. Like I was into that. So I went through a period where I was in a relationship with someone who did not care for horror at all. And so it wasn't ever really prioritized other than like, I think we watched True Blood, which again, very horror still, but yeah, I went some years where I wasn't diving into it too deeply. So I've since gotten over that and I've dived really deep, and I love to go backwards and see all the stuff I missed because I was a kid and it just wasn't accessible to me.
Yeah, I was, as a teenager, and I got into the Ickweedles. You know what that is?
I don't.
Ickweedles? No? IKWYDLS. I Know What You Did Last Summer. Remember that?
Oh, fuck those movies.
We call it the Ickweedles.
Oh my God, that's why I don't know it, because I don't care that much.
No, I made that acronym up. I just decided to make that up.
Are you the president of the Ickweedles fan club or what?
Listen, I am the Ickweedles fan master. Let me tell you that right now. I do have a fanzine that I send out. I print it out on my dot matrix printer every month, and I ship it out for a low fee of 25.
Your glasses are sliding down, you nerd.
25 cents a month, and you will get the fanzine for Ickweedles. So.
Okay, if I saw it in print, I would know what it was, but
it's totally like
the way you said that.
Totally like a punk fanzine.
Stop it. Oh.
Let me show you here. Ickweedles.
I know it. I know it when I see it in print. I understand it. Yeah, I'm in a couple horror groups. People talk about things, but those movies were always kind of throwaway movies to me. Yeah. But that's okay. It's the 90s, and as I've mentioned in previous episodes, I sort of have a love-hate relationship with the 90s. So.
Yep, for sure. And then, I think if I had to think back on what my favorite or most impactful moment as a kid watching horror, being scared, the tube TV is it was a totally different business. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Tube television is a very, very different animal from the flat screens people watch movies on today. And those of us who were fortunate and blessed enough to have a relatively large, not one of the wall size ones, but one that's, more than 15 inches. We had a nice size one that was in one of those wooden cabinets. Tube TV, and when you sit in front of that thing at night, there is a resonance.
Did you ever put your tongue on it on the screen?
I'm not going to answer that question because one time my mom asked me, "Who's licking the television? I'm tired of wiping it off." And I told her it wasn't me. So if I say if I go back on that now, she's going to know it was me. And so I'm not.
Well, we don't have to talk about you doing it, but I was totally a TV licker, and that is what LaCroix tastes like to me.
Wow. This tastes like a tube TV. So
the plain flavor anyway.
So what I loved at night was when my parents would be asleep, and I would always be watching stuff late at night. I'd just get up and that tube TV would be on. It would be there's this slight frequency that permeates the air that's audible.
There's a hum to it,
and you can feel it. And it's anyway. What messed that whole thing up for me was watching Poltergeist as a kid.
Oh, fuck. Yeah.
Poltergeist.
Yeah.
When I watched Poltergeist as a kid, that was the first time I remember dreading. After the movie went off, I didn't want to turn the TV back on or, off. I just wanted to sit there. I was afraid what was going to happen.
Oh, no.
When you end a movie, you watch it late at night by yourself in the dark. There's something about that's different than if you watch a movie at 3 o'clock in the afternoon.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah.
So... when that movie was over that night, I just sat there with the tube TV and the tape got to the end.
Oh boy.
And it stopped. And then when the tape stopped, the TV went to that fuzzy screen.
Uh-huh.
Because that's what it does.
Snow, Channel 3. Yeah.
Yeah, I had that Channel 3 Snow going on. And that's a great name for a punk band, Channel 3 Snow.
Hell yeah, that's our punk band. TM. Channel
We're
3
gonna call
song.
it Channel 3 Snow. Yeah, girl, let's write some punk songs. But anyway, yeah, Poltergeist messed me up. So from being a kid, those were the ones that really impacted me. The early ones that I saw that made me interested in it, and then the first movie that scared the crap out of me was Poltergeist.
Nice. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that tracks for the time period. Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, geez, our intro to horror, similar.
Yeah, very similar.
Two kids on opposite sides of the country, but
I was in Denver and Texas during that time, and I don't think you've left the 4 square block area of Milwaukee.
it's bigger than 4 square blocks, but I have never lived anywhere else. No.
Milwaukee's a cool town. I love Wisconsin, though. Even though the winters suck and they last 9 months.
They do. They're horrible.
I still like it here because right now it's beautiful outside.
It is.
Where it's 90 degrees and with ticks and snakes and spiders down in Tennessee right now, it is 75 here and with blue skies, and the water looks beautiful today.
Yeah, it's whatever. Milwaukee's my home, and I haven't gone anywhere. I probably won't for quite a while, so
Yep.
I just make the best of it over here, and it's not so bad.
And you know what? You can experience dope ass horror movies in Denver, Texas, or Milwaukee.
That's right.
And it just as long as it just takes a curious kid wanting to scare themselves at night, right?
That's right.
All right. Well, I am Owen Brand.
I'm Katie Cadaver.
This has been the VHS Vault podcast. I hope you enjoyed it. We will see you next time.
Bye.
We've got wood and stakes for all the vampires. And you can melt those zombies with salt. We've got silver bullets for the wolves. We've got it all down in the vault.